speaks a lot in the community about Azure, Microsoft, and I don't know what else. And so, yeah, she's going to talk about Azure Data Factory. And with that, we'll turn it over to Jess, and we'll give you a thumbs up once your slides are shared or whatever you have to share, and go for it.
Okay, thank you. I want to share screen. Let me make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. There we go. Okay. Thumbs up.
Yeah, we got Azure Data Factory slide.
Excellent.
That looks good.
On the nice Microsoft slides, of course. So thank you for introducing me. I had the pleasure of meeting Dustin for the first time last fall at the annual PASS Summit conference, where we were both speaking in the data engineering track. So that's how I got to meet this group. I've known Andrew for many years. And let me just give you a brief intro on me. So my name is Jes Schultz. Pronouns are she and her. I'm located in the Denver area. And I am a software engineer in commercial software engineering at Microsoft. So it's a little bit different of an org. Not a lot of people have heard of us. There's about 1,000 people worldwide. We're small crews of 6 to 8 people that go to Microsoft customers that are looking to build things in Azure, and we code with our customers. We're typically working on very cutting edge systems, very data heavy systems, very lots of ML, lots of AI. If stuff like that sounds interesting, let me know. We're hiring heavily all around, not just the US, but the world. Would love to talk to you about what I do, what we do, and why it's so fun. My contact information is here as well. I used to blog, but nowadays I just push my code to GitHub. So you'll find the slides and information that I have there. And so today we're just going to have a brief tour of Azure Data Factory. So Azure Data Factory is Microsoft's cloud data orchestration tool. I come from a really heavy SQL Server background. I've been working with that for about 15 years. I was really familiar with a tool called SQL Server Integration Services. For those of you that might have heard of that, you might also be familiar with something like an Informatica, right? A tool for just extract, transform, and load. So Azure Data Factory will do that. It can be used as an ETL tool, can be used as an ELT tool, can also just be used to move massive amounts of data around from sources to destinations, clean it up along the way. One of the things that makes Azure Data Factory stand out as a data movement and orchestration tool is that there are over 90 different data connectors currently. And when you're using the Azure Data Factory service, you're not going to pay any extra for using a Mongo connector or an AWS connector or a Teradata connector. There's just no additional costs for those. You'll see I highlighted a few broad categories of connectors. We cover all of the major clouds, so Azure, AWS, Google. We have connectors for all of the major relational databases, so not just SQL Server, but Oracle, Postgres, MySQL, the list goes on. We cover lots of MPP data warehousing type systems like Teradata and Netezza, NoSQL databases like Cassandra and Mongo. So we also have connectors for a lot of SaaS, software as a service applications. So you can natively connect to Salesforce, Dynamics, CRM, and other pre-built systems. If you go grab my slides, that link there takes you to the overview of the connectors, and you can see what all is being offered currently. So why should you be interested as a data engineer in potentially learning more about Azure Data Factory and using it? One of the benefits of it is that it can be used. I have a lot of customers that use Data Factory because it can be very low code to no code solutions. Don't have to learn a whole new language. It's one of those things where you can use this web-based GUI and create your, we have the pre-built connectors, we have the pre-built source and sync, and all of it in the background is just JSON. Because of that, everything that you create in Azure Data Factory is ready for source control. Azure Data Factory has Git integration built right in. So when you create your Data Factory or even afterwards, you can put in your repository information and you can start checking your code into your source control system right away. In addition to that, Azure Data Factory is able to, so we're going to have this beautiful screen that we use to create these pipelines. What are they running on, right? We have Spark clusters underneath it. All of this is able to be managed as infrastructure as code using the built-in Azure Resource Manager templates and rolled into your CI and CD process. So I feel like the group that is creating Azure Data Factory is really trying to make it as engineering friendly as possible, as DevOps friendly as possible. So some of the main features, so I'm gonna open it, so just a couple of slides to set the stage. I'll be opening up the Azure portal here in a few minutes and showing you the basic building blocks of Data Factory. What I would say most people are interested in using Data Factory for. Number one, copy data tool. Probably the most frequently used part of Azure Data Factory. It is a source and a destination. It is designed to easily allow you to ingest data from any source. Remember, we've got dozens of connectors into a data lake. One of the benefits of this copy data tool, which I'll show you a very simple example of, is that you don't have to understand all of the bits and pieces. You don't have to go in and manually create your linked services and then your runtime integrations and then your pipelines. You specify your source, you specify your destination, you can set some advanced like data mapping things on it, and then you schedule it to run. That's it. If you do want, you can build your own custom pipelines. We have multiple activities that can be built onto them if you want to go a little bit deeper into it. The other main feature of Data Factory are the data flows. So data flows are where you are going to be heavily exploring or transforming your data. There's two types right now: mapping data flows and wrangling data flows. Wrangling are newer, mapping have been around a while and are probably the more popular of the two. Mapping data flows are great for known data, known schemas. You know what you want to extract out of one system, how you may want to filter it, aggregate it, cleanse it, and then put it into a source system. This is all built, again, on top of this pipeline and can be easily scaled up and scaled down to handle the workload. Wrangling data flows are a newer feature using Power Query built into Azure Data Factory. So it's an M language, or it generates M, and really lets you take a data set and ask questions of it, explore it, and then take the results of whatever you've explored, export it into either data sets to save for later, or create pipelines out of it to use for later. So with that, let me open up some Data Factory here and give you an idea of what it looks like. So for those of you that may have never seen it before, here is the Microsoft Azure portal. List of my resources are down on the left. I'm going to go to Data Factories. I've already set mine up. When you go to create yours, it's a matter of, name your resource group, give it a name. You can, again, choose your Git integration immediately when you set it up, or do that at a later time. So my Data Factory entrance screen is going to be the administrative portion. I want to come to author and monitor to be able to actually produce things like the pipelines, the copy activities, the data flows. And because I have multiple subscriptions in Azure, it always takes at least a good minute while I try to entertain you as it goes through and does all of the authentication. You'll be greeted with a wonderful screen that's going to show you the different quick activities that you can do if we ever get there. It's probably been 20 seconds and it feels like an hour. There we go. Okay, so Azure Data Factory, let's get started. You'll see you can set up your code repo, create a pipeline manually, copy data task, create a pipeline from a template. So there's a cool thing I didn't mention earlier. If you create a pipeline using a series of tasks, you can templatize that. I think I just made that word up. And then reuse that pattern, but with different sources or different destinations in the future, saving yourself time and effort. And then there's those data flows. So a couple of things to note over here on the left is our pane of things we can do. Author is where you would do a majority of your work. You'll see we have options to create pipelines, create our data sets, which our pipelines will ingest, or if we wanted to create our data flows. The monitoring screen is where we are able to look at our different pipelines and their executions. Have they succeeded? Have they failed? You'll see I was about 50-50 today. Other things that you'll be able to see are like your integration runtimes. So this built-in infrastructure that actually runs everything. You can see any self-hosted, any Azure hosted. And manage allows you to do things like look at your linked services. So what are your sources and what are your destinations? Your Git configuration. New feature we just enabled in general availability, global parameters. So all of our pipelines allow you to pass in parameters, use variables in them. We now allow global parameters that can be shared between pipelines in the same data factory. Just an example of the things that we're just showing that it's constantly improving. All right, let me show you a quick copy data task because I said that's one of the most popular, and it'll start to give you an idea of how you can build a basic pipeline. So I'm going to come to copy data. Just for a quick example, I am going to take some data from a relational database. I'm going to extract it and land it in just generic Azure storage. This is a Azure blob storage that I have enabled Gen 2 hierarchical namespaces on so we can use it as a true data lake. The copy data task or tool is a really simple wizard. What I'm going to say, so let's see. So I'm going to do SQL DB to data lake. And the pipeline name already exists. Okay. Azure SQL DB to data lake. All right. When you build it, you can choose if you want to run it once now at the end of this or run it on a schedule. I will be able to also specify that schedule at a later point in time. And I have to move my monitor around so that I can actually see the rest of my screen. Oh, did it lose me?
You lost the screen share, yeah.
Yep, it disconnected. I moved my laptop 1 inch too far. Oh, lost it completely.
I'll throw out there while you're getting it
Let me
shared
know when
again.
I'm back.
If anyone wants to put questions in chat, we can have those kind of ready to go towards the end here. But I do not see the screen yet. We'll let you know once it pops up for us. Oh, I think it's happening.
Back?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. Now everything has shifted screens, such is the joy of doing demos online. All right. As I was saying, you can run things now. You can set a schedule here, or again, after you build the pipeline, you can schedule it at a later point in time. The first thing that you'll need to choose is the source data store, just to kind of walk you through some of your options. So you can, these are what are defined as our already existing linked services or data sets. You'll see that we can add new ones. They're categorized into Azure, database, file, generic protocols. I'm going to create a new one to show you how to do that. So this will give you a better idea of all of the different connectors that we have. You know, DB2, Dynamics 365, you know, software as a service. You know, we can connect to HDFS. Even Microsoft Access, there's a throwback for me. You know, Postgres, lots of SAP options, Spark clusters, Snowflake. Again, large collection of connectors available for both sources and destinations. I know that what I am looking for is specifically an Azure SQL database. I'm able to, because this is already built into my Azure subscription, it's a resource that already exists there. Very simple for me to choose. If you are an Azure user and familiar with Azure Key Vault for storing your secrets, note that that is integrated with Azure Data Factory completely. Right. So I've set up basically just my connection, my linked service. I say next, and depending on what you choose as this source is, as your source connection, as your source linked service, this next screen, the data set, is going to look different every time. It's one of the, I would say if there's a struggle that I've had with learning Data Factory, it's that every time I try to pick a new data source or destination to work with, the options are different. Kind of hard to document 90 different connectors when things change constantly. But I'm now comfortable with probably 7 to 10 of them, which is what most people experience. And then occasionally you get a new one thrown at you and you eventually learn it based on prior experience. So this is a small sales database. I want to take and export this data, just be able to move it into flat files to be able to manipulate it later. You'll see I can just select the tables I want. I could also, because this is a database, populate it with a query. Nope. The next thing that I am allowed to do, because this is, again, relational database, would be to apply a filter or filters to one or more tables. Another option that I have, which I don't use too much when connecting to a database where I know that my schema and structure are probably solid, but you can also validate your data source. What that does is essentially pull out a preview so you can check to make sure that you have the data you want. That works with most data sources. And now we choose where we want the data to land, our destination. Again, I'm going to create a new connection. I'm going to be looking for Azure Data Lake Storage. All right, here we go. I know that I should be able to click test connection and have it be successful. So again, simple to connect to an existing Azure service. Here it's going to have me, oh, that is not the one I wanted then. That doesn't matter. I'm actually going to go back and modify my test data lake. And choose the correct one. I've built a lot of these tests this last couple of weeks to do all these presentations. So here we go. So my AdventureWorks folder is where I want things to go. You'll notice that I can, it is going to put it as a text file. There's my suffix. I say next. And now, because again, this is one of those things where depending on what your destination data set is, will determine what different format settings you can get. So when I'm dealing with anything going into blob storage, data lake storage, I have options like what type of formats are natively supported here. I don't have to code anything special to get it into JSON or Parquet format. Because this is coming from a relational database, I'm going to choose text. There's some advanced settings I could choose. One of the things that you can do and is recommended and actually required for some data storage like Synapse Analytics, the rebranding of our SQL data warehouse, is this staging store between the source and the destination. And here's our summary. So it's telling us it's going to create this task, the connection name and the data set name. Sometimes it gives things weird names. If I notice that, I do things like rename it. Same thing with my destination. Otherwise, especially if you have a data factory where multiple developers are contributing multiple pipelines and it's a little bit Wild West and no one is controlling what data sources are there and what data sets are there, the naming can get really confusing. All right, so what it's doing now is generating the code to create the data sets, create the pipeline, which is the orchestration mechanism, and then run it. And now I can say monitor. I've not run it yet. How do I find it? How do I run it? Great question. I go to this author tab. I expand my pipelines. And here's what I created, Azure SQL DB to Data Lake. So here is my pipeline view. You'll see if I click on this white pane, it just kind of shows me the overall pipeline information. Like I said, parameters. I could pass in parameters. I could create variables. I can determine, or when I run it, it will give me some output from it. When I click on this box, this is considered an activity. That's that next menu item over. Because I have multiple tables that are being iterated through, it's been smart enough to already create a for each loop. And inside of that for each loop, we have a copy data task. So again, this copy data wizard just does all the work for you. So let's go back to the pipeline. Yeah, there we go. And to run it, a few different ways that I can do this. I do want to turn this on for my next demo. So because I am in a demo mode, right, I've not published this out to I've not actually pushed this out yet to my development or production environment. I am just merely in a working mode. I can debug it, but the next thing after I've verified that it's ready to go and everything has been validated, I could schedule it or trigger it. For the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to pick a quick debug since I don't have all of my source control set up. You'll see that the parameters that are being passed in is an array of values. That's the tables that I chose from that wizard. This is something that can be customized, parameterized, all of that. And now it's running, and the pipeline output here at the bottom is telling me what's going on. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything runs successfully. So that's the copy data task. Choose your source, choose your destination, set some basic mapping, parameters. You'll see that again, depending on what your source is, what your destination is, different things are already set for you, like this for each loop, and then you can just go ahead and run it. My copy task has succeeded. If I go back to the portal and I take a quick look at storage accounts and go to Data Engineer Data Lake, look in my containers, look in that AdventureWorks container. You'll see that here I have all of those text files that were automatically produced. Minimum work on my part. So again, that's the basic copy task in Azure Data Factory. Again, with these pipelines, say that I was like, okay, that was really basic, but maybe I want to do more. Again, these pipelines can be edited. I can add one or more of these activities to it and link them together. There are things, again, copy data. I can bring in, under general, there are things like do lookups, run stored procedures, set variables, call webhooks. I can pull in other Azure services as well. For example, I could call an Azure function in this pipeline. I could add in some machine learning pieces. I could run a Spark job here as well. So very flexible to start with a basic and build upon it as well. So that's the copy data activity. Let me walk you through the other popular tool inside of Azure Data Factory that I mentioned, which is the data flows. So I'm going to show you a mapping data flow. Again, mapping data flows are really designed to help you take kind of a known data set, cleanse it, transform it, aggregate it like a series of steps, and do a little bit more in-depth work than just this copy data activity and the basic pipeline activities let you do. So this one I've already built because it takes a little bit longer to build all of this stuff out, and I didn't want to take 2 hours for this presentation. Figured 1 to 1.5 might be enough. But what I've done is, remember for the copy activity, we started from this data factory home screen. I did the same here with the create data flow screen. The create data flow screen looks like this. So there's a panel where you start with your source data. In this case, the source data that I have is a movies data set. You have different options. You can use a common data model, an Excel file, or you can choose to define a connector like I've done. My data set, if I were to open it, is in it's a linked service to ADLS. You can see that I have it in a movies directory, and I'm getting data from a CSV file. If you were to go to add a source here, again, the data set options that you have in these data flows are as unlimited as they would be with that copy data wizard. Am I clicking too fast? Yes. My data flow debug is not turned on. Okay. All right. Now, when I turn on data flow debug, which I wanted to do for the purposes of this demo, what it's doing is these pipelines, again, run on Spark clusters. So it's starting up a small Spark cluster for me to debug on, to test on. Once that starts up, one of the things that I can do is actually get a preview of my data in real time. I thought I turned that on already, but apparently I didn't. So you'll see as I go through this, because it's a CSV file, it has pulled out my columns. It allows me to do some refining. I can even filter based on start and end times. What I do after defining my source is then add additional transformations. We do this by clicking these little plus signs. You'll see we have a large variety of transformations we can choose from. Common things to use under schema modifiers, make derived columns, do aggregations, pivot or unpivot. For individual rows, we can filter, we can sort, we can modify, and you can do things like split a data source or join two different data sources as well. What I've chosen for the next transformation in my data flow is to do a filter. What I'm trying to do here in this demo is take this list of movies, pull out a set of years pull out a genre, which are comedies, and then I want to find what year had the highest rated comedies. Like, what is the funniest decade of movies? So this filter on is using an expression, and we have an expression builder that pops up as soon as you, as soon as I had started that filter, it would have popped this up. You can come back to it at any time by clicking in that expression builder box. There's full expression reference documentation that's linked right here. You can see, you can look right here to get your functions, you know, concatenate, do mathematical calculations. If you have date values, lots of built-in functions to do things like get the days, get the day of the month. So it's a really, I think it's a fairly full-featured expression builder, having looked at a few of them over the years in different tools. Not the greatest, not the worst, but it's done everything I've needed it to do so far with minimal fuss. So after I have done a filter, let me see if my runtime is going yet. Okay. What I had intended to show you, except Azure's slow tonight, is the data preview here for on the source would show hundreds of rows. As I go to filter it down, and after I've filtered it, I can inspect it. I see I still have all of those different, those 6 columns. The data preview would show that I now have a reduced number of rows. Then I've gone ahead and I've added another transformation, in this time an aggregation. All right, here we go. My runtime is going. And it's going to get all of those rows from the source eventually. While we're waiting for that, are there any questions in chat yet?
There were a couple in chat. Daniel, did you want to ask either of your questions still?
I don't know how to find the chat in Zoom right now.
We'll have people call them out if they want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy to. Can you hear me, Dustin?
Yeah, we got you.
Sure. Let's see. Okay, one of my questions was, sorry, does the Azure Data Factory have an out-of-the-box function to do incremental loading logic?
Yes. Yes, that can be done.
Okay.
You can choose date. It depends on what your source data structure is, but there are different things to look at it based on dates or based on IDs. And you can specify that each time you run it, you only load since the last date, the last ID column, the last value. So that's typically done, if I remember correctly, when you schedule the runs of it.
That's pretty neat. And I just got to say, so far, I like all these out-of-the-box transforms you're showing. That's
cool.
pretty cool.
Good to hear.
I recently researched Glue, and I didn't see quite as many out-of-box functions as I'm seeing here.
Okay, excellent.
Do you want one more question before you move on, Jess?
Sure, I can take another question. Let it catch up a little bit.
Okay, we got Parag was asking with the copy data. Oh no, the question was about working across clouds, working in data centers. Can you talk at all about what is kind of built in, easy to do with working across different clouds and data centers?
So my experiences with working across clouds is, again, fairly limited. I work at Microsoft. I work on all Azure, but I have worked with a couple customers that have used this to use Google. So we've done like Google BigQuery as a source destination. We've done a lot of different AWS syncs as, or Google Cloud as source, a lot of AWS as destinations. I would say that the experience has been pretty seamless. Obviously, you have to have all of the security set up correctly between the two of them. But the features are there. And I guess they're there, they work. I don't have a ton of experience with them. If there's anything in particular that, like, are you wondering about security? Are you wondering about performance? Are you just wondering how hard is it to use? A little more info in chat would be good, and we can come back to that one. Meanwhile, now that my data has shown up in data preview, let me go back to this data flow. You'll see we have all of these different movies in all of these different genres in all of these different years, and they have ratings. If I go to this filter that I've applied and I choose to preview my data, now we should have already be seeing a reduced amount of rows there just based on the parameters we gave it. All right, so now you'll see it only pulls back anything that has comedy in the genre. The next filter we added was that aggregation. So again, in aggregation, I can choose to group. I have to choose my group by and then what I'm aggregating. So my group by is year. And when I go to aggregates, I make another expression. So again, same expression builder is allowed here to build your aggregations. And it's going to give me an average of the rating. And I've gone ahead and I've converted the rating to an integer so that we're not dealing with floats and partial numbers, just whole numbers. Again, if I go to data preview, I'll see that the number of rows that I have, or number of columns this time, is actually significantly reduced. For me, this is really helpful to have this data flow debug mode and be able to see things as I go along and work at them, especially, again, in this role that I have, where I'm kind of semi-consultant and I might not know the data as well as a full-time employee or a domain expert or someone that deals with it all the time. But here now we see that we're looking at only the data that we declared, which is our group by column, the year, and the comedy rating, which has in this. After that, I've added one last transformation, and that is to actually do something with this data, and that is put it in a data sync, the destination. When you go to do a sync, it's just like adding a source. You can create a new connection. We've seen this connection screen multiple times now. In this case, I am again going to the Azure data lake that I had created. In this case, in that movies container, I created a new output file or output folder, and then the file will be put there. Again, I have all sorts of, I can set my column delimiters, I can set my row delimiters, I can choose first row as header, all of that for my sync. And I've created a very basic mapping data flow. So now once I have that, I can be validated, making sure everything is working, no errors are found, great. And if I want to debug it, I need to simply, you'll notice again that this is a pipeline, right? So everything that we build, whether it's a copy data task, whether it's a data flow, if it's something we build custom, everything comes back to these pipelines. So this mapping data flow is an activity within the pipeline. To trigger it, we would go to debug, and it is running it in this debug environment that's been brought up. While that's running, I wanted to show a couple of other things, features that I had mentioned when I first started talking about this, like everything's just code, right? But you're not seeing any code. Jess, where is the code for my pipeline? Not very obvious, but up here in the top right corner, you can click on the little brackets and it will bring up the code. And you'll notice that everything is just JSON in the background. So here's the JSON for the pipeline. If I go into my data flow, again, I have this code button. This might take, and this is all code that's been built in. Most of it is in that script. But all it's telling us here is we're going to be using a mapping data flow, source data set, sync data set, what transformations are happening. Here's the script. So behind the scenes, this is all JSON code. It can be put into source control. And if I had this particular data factory set up for Git, you would see it. Where did my mouse go? What a wonderful time for my mouse to run out of battery. Kind of like me, it's getting tired at the end of the week and is ready for the weekend. There we go. All right. The other thing that I wanted to point out, I had mentioned that it was possible to get the infrastructure as code by extracting the ARM templates. ARM templates are the resource manager templates. That's Microsoft's brand of it. Those can be exported here at the top for any given pipeline that you build. And with that, that is my, let's go back to Transform Movies. Let's go back to my pipeline run. You'll see that it's succeeded. And again, if I was to go out to my storage container, let's go back to Data Engineer Data Lake. Let's go into the Movies container. You'll see I have my Movies CSV file that I started with, and in output, I will have the CSV file. This would be one for each year with its individual rating. So that is my as quick as I can make it without showing every single feature and spending an entire day on Azure Data Factory Tour. So I hope for those of you that was new to the tool that it sparks some interest and looks like a great place to get started for ETL and ELT and data movement in Azure. What questions do we have? I feel like there's going to be some.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like there's with the copy data, can a subset of data, say tables and columns in the case of RDBMS, been a long day, be copied over?
Yes, definitely. As I mentioned when I was going through the copy data wizard, after I select my source, and I choose either all of the tables or a subset of tables. On each table, it does allow me to filter those, and that filter I can write specific queries against it. I can choose dates. It does allow me to just extract a portion of that data.
Okay.
On
I'll
that
say,
note, I've seen some cool demos where like you read in the list of tables you care about from a database and then loop through. She showed the parameters. Like you can actually do quite a bit with those, much like SSIS. So I think it's slightly easier to find it in Azure Data Factory, but once you kind of get the hang of it, there's a lot you can parameterize, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah, it took me a little bit to get used to using the parameters in Data Factory, so I agree with you there, Dustin. But once you get the hang of how to pull them in and how to loop through them, makes things a lot faster.
cool. And there's another one here. Is there any way we can plug any code like Python or Shell before any step? Sometimes we need to execute code for processing files.
You should be able to do that. Like, so in a pipeline, let me just go here under activities. So some options that you do have, depending on where your code lives, stored procedures, you can use Azure Functions. I thought there was Azure Data. So if you have Databricks set up, you can call notebooks or Python scripts there. Okay, yes, that's what I was going to say. There is a Spark process as well where you specify what cluster it would run against and what script or jar you would use. So I think that's what you're looking for there. And then if this was the case, right, so we needed to run so after we've looped through and created these tables, we needed to then run some sort of notebook against it to analyze it. That's when we can, right, we can make these, we can link our services together. This is very SSIS-like, and we're allowed to do success, failure, completion, or skips on those steps as they link together.
Okay, and then I think Dustin might have answered this one, but I'll go ahead and ask it to you as well. Is there any data cataloging capabilities within ADF?
That's a great question. We don't have anything in terms of like lineage built in yet. I know that we are working on the next gen of Azure Data Catalog, which hopefully will bring some of those capabilities in. Right now, nothing great.
Okay, and then what else we got here? Let's see.
I see. Now, I found the chat finally, and I see Dustin's been busy being my
yeah.
my right hand person here. So thank you.
If I'm wrong, though, tell me. I'm not too proud to be told.
Yeah, right.
I'm not.
No, you're right. So I see a question from Ryan asking if you can edit the data flow JSON directly. Absolutely. That is, if you know what the schema or structure should be, you want to go in and make changes, definitely. That is, the UI is not required. It just makes easy, what we like to call the low code, no code solutions for citizen developers. Yeah.
And we have some conversations happening in chat. We'll see if anyone presents it as a topic for the last part of Glue versus Azure Data Factory. Obviously, they're different, but there's some overlaps in the kind of role they play. So if you have any opinions you want to share on that, we're all ears, but we'll probably discuss that amongst the group more either today or the next time.
Yeah, and I don't have I know what glue is. I've gotten reviews on it from customers. I personally have not used it yet in any of my projects. So I don't have a ton of comparison to give you.
So this is Daniel. I did do some research on glue and presented last month, and I didn't see anything in glue. We were having a discussion on what in Amazon would have a nice expression builder like this. And the only thing that was suggested by another viewer here is that the data migration service might in Amazon, but if I don't want to migrate a database, I just want to move some data. And I didn't find that glue had anything as slick as this expression builder you showed us.
Cool.
Yeah, I think like from what I've seen of glue, it seems like the like no code, low code capabilities are much more powerful in Azure Data Factory. And as long as you're careful not to create too big of a mess by just going crazy with all kinds of connected things all in one pipeline, I think it's probably got more of that, hey, let's not write any code at all type of capability to it than glue. Would you agree with that, Daniel, from what you've seen?
So far, yeah. With the glue, you could put out templates for PySpark, and then you'd have to fill in the field names and so forth. But the number of pre-built templates was, not that large. Not to say there might be some in the community, but there was no expression builder just to build out an expression and have it coded for you. There was no such thing. So this is neat.
Cool. Any other questions from people in the group? Feel free to just unmute and ask them if you have some. If not, we can.
Yeah. And I wanted to say, last slide I have 2 resources. Number 1, the Microsoft Docs. Again, short of documenting every single field for every single source and destination connection, the docs are pretty comprehensive on how to build your pipelines, what the different activities do, how to parameterize information, again, how to use the source control, how to build in your CI/CD. So a lot of those bigger picture things that you need to do. If you're looking to go kind of step by step through this and you want a project to give you some hands-on experience, out on GitHub, one of our MCTs, Microsoft trainers, built an ELT with Data Factory workshop. It's a set of scripts that you're going to run through. The first one is getting an Azure subscription, right? So you'll have to have some form of Azure subscription, even if it's through a Visual Studio subscription or the free tier. Setting up a resource group, setting up a storage account, setting up a data factory. And then from there walks you through 2 different scenarios. 1, building a pipeline to copy data, kind of like I showed you. And number 2, building out a mapping data flow. I love these kinds, like this is how I learn, right? I always try to find this kind of hands-on, give me like some sample data and a set of steps where I can go and do the basics and then play with it a little bit more. And this workshop definitely enables you to do that. So that's my recommendation on building that. Great question on how far can you go in learning Azure with free tier or low cost experience. You can get a majority of the services at the lowest tier of service. So nothing's going to be fast and you won't be able to crunch large pieces of data, but you'll have access to, I would say, probably 90% of the services at the lowest tier. And if your company does, again, if you have like Visual Studio subscriptions, if your company will do those, those will give you a certain amount of Azure credits per month, which can be even more useful in learning, developing, and growing your skills.
You can do a lot of stuff for cheap if you're careful, but you know how the cloud goes. Be very careful, and the pricing is super confusing, so it's hard to predict. It's better just to be like, I'm gonna make it as small as possible, turn it off immediately if I can't do it with the free tier, of course. Or just become independent and make it a tax write-off like I did, and then you're not nearly as stressed.
Or come work at
Not the easiest.
Microsoft.
Yeah, there you go. Working at Microsoft's probably an easier path.
Mm,
Still have health benefits and all that, so that's a good.
yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, I had one, Jess. Your GitHub link. Do you have that? Could you pull that up for a moment, or shout it out, and I'll try and share that.
Yes. Let me put my. And I have not uploaded this one yet, but I will do that by tomorrow morning. So github.com/GRRLGEEK. And you'll find it in my, I have a few different repos out there. Look for the one that says Azure on it. That's where I store. And if you're looking for any other Azure scripts, you might find something of interest in there.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much, Jess.
Yeah, and let me put that so that it's a little bit easier. github.com/grrgek. I'll just put that in chat as well, so you can copy and paste from there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I threw them in our Slack group already for anyone in the Slack group.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Then,
well, yeah.
Well,
Anything else you want to share?
I just wanted to say, for those of you who were there at the beginning, that was the view from the top of my mountain this weekend. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.